Today I am down here in Clearwater, Florida doing some film work for a client. I wanted to show you guys an updated version of my, call it 2023 Sony A6100 not so cinema rig. At the end of the day, it's an A6100. I've built it up to basically maximize the most that I can get out of that camera until I move on to the next build. I want you guys to be aware that all the peripherals, all of the attachments I'm adding to this camera are a little bit overkill, I'll be honest, but that's because I intend to upgrade along the way, and before we get too far in 2023, I had to show you guys what I'm rocking right now. Without further ado, this is my fully kitted out A6100 by Sony. It is obviously, it's got a lot going on here, and I'm gonna break it down right now and build it back up to this point and show you guys all the attachments and how I get it to this point of functionality. Down to just the camera body, we've got the Sony A6100. And real quick, this isn't a review, but I do want to mention that I wouldn't necessarily buy this camera body yet. I do like the Sony A6000 series, but I think there's better options within that series than the A6100. The first and probably most crucial piece to this build, besides the camera itself, is going to be the cage. This is a Nicey Rig cage. I actually looked at some more expensive options, but found that the Nicey Rig had just the most optimization as far as customization. One issue though that I ran into is, and I'll show you once we get to the top handle, but I did have to make some modifications to it. Specifically right here, I had to shave down this cold shoe to be able to slide my top handle onto the cage. But essentially, this cage comes with a little tool, magnetic on the bottom, which makes taking these screws in and out very easy. In order to put this on the camera body, we do need to actually take the lens off and slide it in this way. And then we can remove our little magnetic tool here and screw in our bottom screw. And then we can replace the tool. Magnetic tool is super nice, always there, never falls off. Really great to have it, access to it all the time. And that's really it. To put the cage onto the camera body, it's really just one screw, which is nice. It's a pro and con because one, it's easy to put on and take off. The con there is gonna be that it's only one point of structural contact. So if you had a second screw in there, that might be more ideal, but for this setup, I really find that one is enough. Now, because I don't like to keep my sensor open like that, we'll take a lens. This is a Sigma 16mm 1.4. This is a crop sensor lens for crop sensor cameras, and I think it looks pretty good. Comes with the lens hood here, which you can slide on there. I tend to actually leave it this way just so I have it on the camera. If I need to swap out, I can use it, but I actually prefer to use filters over the lens hood. Kind of a different, obviously you're not cutting out lens flares as much, but this lens hood doesn't do that great of a job at doing that anyways. So I'm running a riser ring onto a Tiffin circular polarizer onto a Gobi variable ND filter. So they are stacked, and I find that it works out pretty well because you can just grab the circular polarizer, get it set, and then you can hold the circular polarizer while you set the ND and get that ready to go, and that's how that works. Now that we've got the camera kind of put together here, we're gonna set it aside and start working on the base plate and the rail system. For the base plate, I went with again, a Nicey Rig, not for necessarily the price point, but just because it has the most mounting points on it. I mean, there's literally 3/4 inch screw holes on this entire thing, so a lot of options there. I believe these are 10-inch, they could be 8-inch small rig, 15mm rods, and they just slide in perfectly into here. Now my terminology is not that great, but I know what works for my system and not. I believe this is called an Arcus Swiss plate, or I should say what's on the bottom of the camera cage is an Arcus Swiss plate. This is a nice little quick adapter, quick release that just screws in and out and grabs the plate. So I'm gonna basically put that onto here. And again, very useful. I'm gonna need this little tool again, always magnetic on the bottom of my cage, so I can easily get this screw put in without having to go hunt down a flathead screwdriver. We've got our base plate built out. We've got our camera ready to now sit on top of the base plate. So I'm gonna put the Arcus Swiss plate in there and it'll just clamp around there. I tried to basically center the lens because obviously you can see the camera itself is off put this way, but I try to center the lens with the rods. I find that that works best, and we'll just simply tighten it down here. And actually, before I move on from there, this I should tell you why I even have the quick release. It's simply because if I'm taking this from handheld or tripod setup to the gimbal, I want to be able to do that as quickly as possible, and I can actually use my camera with the cage on it on the gimbal. It is not too much weight. So basically all I have to do is unscrew this, take it off the base plate, and now it's ready to go onto the gimbal. We are ready for our top handle. This is a small rig. No real rhyme or reason here with the brands, guys. I'm simply buying things based on what they're gonna do and how they're gonna perform. So we're gonna slide that onto the cage and set it into place right above the cold shoe on the camera. This top handle I really like. It's aluminum, so it's pretty lightweight from the get-go. It's got actually rubber grip here on the bottom, so it sits very comfortably in the hand. It's also just long enough for my hand, so for me it works great. The other thing too is it's got a ton of 3/4 inch attachments up top. You've also got a couple of ARRI style mounting points, which is why I bought this handle specifically. I'm gonna take my ARRI style small rig monitor mounting point, and I'm gonna put this on the front of the top handle, tighten that down really good, and then I'm actually gonna wait to put the monitor on because we've got some work to do on the back of the camera. Before I jump into installing the power system on here, I do want to talk a little bit about that. For the longest time, I was running just these little Sony batteries. I'd keep about 3 of them on hand at any point, and I try and charge them whenever I need to. But that really gets to be time consuming when you have to swap batteries, monitor your battery levels, and then also if you're worried about shooting an entire day, or maybe the lack of time you'll have available to recharge the batteries. It's just, I don't want to worry about power. I'm gonna butcher this name. I want to say it's Cuckoo. It's some V-mount battery mounting plate that also has variable. It's got a switch for toggle on and off. You've got USB on there as well, and then you've got a V-mount port as well as 5 volt, 8 volt, 12 volt, and 15 volt outputs for the camera. So I essentially run my monitor off this as well as the camera body, allowing it to recharge while I'm using it. But the cool thing is it's got, like I said, variable voltage here. So you're a camera, you want to know exactly how much voltage it needs to charge. I want to say the A6100 is close to 8 volts, but I think it's actually 7.2, don't quote me. So I actually charge it on 5 volts because I want to maintain a little bit less. That way I'm never running into an overcurrent issue on charging the camera body. So this guy just mounts to the 15mm rods coming off the back, and it just clamps down there like that. I have a little bit of adjustability depending on how I need it set up, but I try and keep it kind of locked in there. And this will actually be easier to show you now and before I have a bunch of cords and everything going through here with my wire management. But with the A6100, you can actually flip the screen up a bit. So that's what I do, is bring it up and out. And then it basically fills this void here. It allows me to look down beyond the top handle to actually manage my menu settings and anything I need to do better or easier on the actual camera screen. Now to power this whole system, I've got a V-mount battery. This thing is a brick, quite the unit. Especially for this setup, but it allows me to run all day. I can literally be recording nonstop for probably 8 to 10 hours without having to recharge this thing. It's a 6600 milliamp battery, 95 watt hours, and it slides right onto the back of our V-lock mounting plate. There, clicks into place. The other thing I like about having the battery situated like this is it's a flat surface that I can actually put against my chest if I'm filming, and it's a point of contact that's going to stabilize the footage. So it's just kind of a nice little perk of also having that large battery on the back. This next piece is honestly a trial. I'm just testing stuff out here, and it's kind of working for me, but all the peripherals, like I said, I'm basically doing this to put all of these on a nicer camera down the line. They're not going to stay on this A6100 forever. So what I did was I bought a Sony XM1 microphone. It's a shotgun mic with a little small rig cold shoe attachment there, and it's an XLR microphone. This camera body does not have XLR input. All it has is your typical 3.5mm headphone jack, or aux cord if you will, but I wanted to give this a shot and see if it would actually work. So I bought this little adapter to go from XLR down to 3.5mm aux, which plugs into the camera. Now I don't love how the sound is coming out of this microphone, and so I'm not gonna really suggest it to you if you are running any camera body without an XLR input, because I do believe this needs power, call it phantom power, to be able to run at its full operation level. Right now, without any power from a battery source or the camera body itself, it's kind of working in a dumbed down version of itself. So I mean, it works. I have to dial up and amp up the audio levels quite a bit to get something good out of it, but it's better than having no audio. Speaking of audio, let's jump on to the wireless lav setup. These are the Sarmonic wireless lavs. I've had them now for a couple of years. I've actually got a second one of these. This is the receiver. I've got 2 of these ones. I can't remember the technical term, but I've got 2 of these. So I can mic up 2 people having a conversation, clip it onto their shirt here, you know the drill. And then I can capture basically 2 lav mics to this receiver, which plugs again right into the camera body using that aux cord. Now, if I'm not using this or I just want this thing handy, I actually just clip it right on here onto the cable for the shotgun mic. Maybe not best practice, but it works. And then this guy goes onto the cold shoe here, just slides on there and just sits in place. And then this cord, I usually try to wrap underneath the screen that we've brought out. That's why I want to show you guys the screen first, is because really there's a bunch of wires underneath it. That's where I hide everything. It's not pretty, but it works. Now we've got our receiver set up there. I've got this guy on standby if I need it. Plug it onto somebody, hit record. Cable management, I use one of these little ties here. I actually run it, this is gonna be very hard to show you, but I run it underneath the V-mount battery over a bunch of the wiring and then back through, and that just kind of holds all this wiring back there a little bit more steady. We're almost there. We have to put on the monitor, set some power up to the monitor, and we're getting close, guys. Monitor, again, overkill. Ninja Atomos 5, it is a recorder as well as a monitor. I primarily use it as a monitor. I will eventually, once I get a better camera and start, filming larger file sizes or recording larger file sizes, then I'll start using it as a recorder, but it basically just sits on the top there on your RE Swiss style mounting point, and this has full tilt here, and you can also tilt it side to side a little bit. I don't use that too much, it's mostly right here. We need to add a few more power cables because I don't want to run batteries on anything except for this one battery to the whole camera system. So what I'm going to do here is run a D-tap on the side of our V-mount plate, and I'm going to run this dummy battery to the back of the Atomos Ninja. Click it in place. We've got power to our monitor. We need power to our camera body. This is a DC to basically a micro USB. Runs again to that 5-volt output. Make sure you're using the correct one. And then again, feed that cord underneath the screen of the A6100 and plug it in to the side of the camera body. Some of you may be asking, why am I using this and not a dummy battery? And I've never tried a dummy battery in the camera body. I've only heard some criticism about it. Occasionally, you run a dummy battery in a camera body, there's just the potential that it could fry the internals. I've heard that there's less risk when you do it this way as opposed to running a dummy battery, especially having a very controlled 5-volt right to the camera body. And when you are getting the dummy batteries, I think you really need to spend good money on them because you're banking on their internals being smart enough to dictate how much power to send to the camera. And they're not designed for one camera, they're built for a lot of times several cameras in a lineup. So I just think this is a much more controllable way to do it. And again, I've never ran a dummy battery myself, but I just don't want to put myself at a further risk to damage the camera. This is a 15-inch HDMI to micro HDMI cable. And the reason I mention it's 15 inches, I actually bought, I think, a 10-inch one, and it was long enough to basically go from here to here, but I found that it would just put a little bit too much tension on things when I was moving around. But I'll show you with the 15-inch cable, it's a bit long, but you know what? It gives me that flex on the ports. So if I'm bumping into things, there's all this flex. You're not putting all that flex or pressure onto the ports of the camera body or the monitor. I think it works pretty well. It is not the best looking thing, but it's out of the way because I'm rolling focus here, gripping the camera here, gripping the camera here. It's never in my way. Let's go ahead and do actually a lens swap on this thing because I have a couple different ones. Take the Sigma 16mm off, and I've got this Sony 85mm 1.8. It is actually for a full frame camera, so on this crop sensor, it's probably closer to about 100, maybe even a little more, 100mm. So we'll put that on, same way. Everything is E-mount that I run for lenses, makes everything very simple. With this adapter ring for my ND and polarizer filters, I can actually take this off my 16mm and put it right onto the 85. So I'm getting those juicy shots outside where I need that ND, I need that variable ND filter, but I'm also maybe shooting a car or a building with a lot of glass windows. Now I've got my circular polarizer on the 85mm set up very nicely. Let's do one more lens change. I've kind of shown you these lenses in the order of which I use them the most. So the Sigma 16mm, I use it all the time. The 85mm, I use it second most, especially for interview shots or B-roll. This is the kit lens that came with the camera, almost never gets used. It's a 16 to 50 millimeter. I've also got a variable ND on it. The only thing I like about this lens is it's my only zoom lens, and it's also got in-lens stabilization. I think Sony calls it optical stabilization. It helps, especially for a camera body that does not have any in-body stabilization. Now back with the Sigma 16 millimeter. This is the setup, guys. This is the run and gun, the usual setup that I have to get the job done. So let's go ahead and power this thing up. We've got our battery indicator light here on the side of the V-mount. We're fully charged. We can go ahead and flip the toggle switch. Then we can go on the Atomos Ninja, hit the power on button there, and we can also turn on the camera, and we can immediately tell that the camera is taking charge from the V-mount battery. So you're just gonna be able to charge while you're actually running it. I think it's a lot better than running the dummy battery where you're not truly charging a battery. The camera just thinks it's constantly getting a certain amount of power, whether it is or whether it is not. Pros and cons of this whole system. Pros, usability. I think having the battery on here, being able to run and not have to worry about power to any of the accessories throughout the entire day is game changing. I highly recommend you sort that out first. Secondly, I slept on not having a monitor for the longest time. There's no reason you should be trying to do all of your work out of a little 2 by 3 inch screen. I mean, do yourself a favor, get a monitor. Doesn't have to be an Atomos Ninja 5. This is overkill. They make a lot of good monitors for cheap. Get something like that where you can really see what you're capturing, and also hopefully one that has focus peaking, maybe zebra. There's all sorts of little things that will help you make sure you're getting the shot appropriately. Now, some of you might be like, wow, this is really overkill. Why even spend this kind of money on an A6100? And I was telling myself the same thing, but after I did it, it's really proven its worth, and I feel like I've gotten so much more work out of this camera before I needed to upgrade to something more expensive. You can do a lot with a little with this camera, and building out the accessories, that way I can later on just upgrade them. The cage, the top handle, that sort of thing, that's gonna be proprietary to the camera body. So if I get a new camera body, I'll just have to get a new cage, but then everything else will just attach right to it. So it's very scalable in that way. Why I built it. I love it. I hope you guys really do enjoy this video. If you have an A6000 series camera that you've built up in maybe an overkill kind of way, I'd love to hear about it. Put it down in the comments. Let me know what attachments you're running, how it works for you. And with that being said, guys, I will see you in the next one. Keep elevating. Adios.